Hi, friends. It's Heidi M. I'm going to be speaking about the feature documentary, A Mother Apart by director Laurie Townshend. So, A Mother Apart is a feature documentary that premiered at Hot Docs Documentary International Film Festival here in Toronto, Canada last year, 2024. Unfortunately, I missed it. I missed the other screenings here in the city because unfortunately, I just couldn't go. So I'm excited to share more about this film now that is more widely available for us here in Canada. And I'll have more to tell you on that very shortly. But just to kind of put it in perspective for you, the documentary explores identity, motherhood, and forgiveness through the journey of Jamaican-American poet and 2S LGBTQ plus activist is Staceyann Chin. If you're not familiar with Staceyann's work, I recommend that you look her up. I've been following her work for a few years. I also managed to see her live when I was at the Sundance Film Festival in 2020. So I'm just impacted by the work that Staceyann Chin does. And this film is a really personal look at her, I guess, search to make a connection with her elusive mother, who left Jamaica to go to Montreal, Canada, and then moves to Germany. And the film sort of also takes us on this journey with Stacey Ann and her daughter Zuri. And they basically are trying to create a sense of home. And the film is a beautiful exploration of what it is like to be a daughter and a mother and a granddaughter, and the different dynamics that kind of play out depending on the role that we inhabit. It also gives us a really poignant narrative of healing and reconciliation. The filmmaker's storytelling looks into really deep and emotional human experiences here, and I have nothing but great things to say about A Mother Apart. Again, it is the filmmaker's first feature documentary. Her name is Laurie Townshend, and you can watch the film now on CBC Gem or nfb.ca here in Canada. I'm going to leave you now with this, and we'll share my interview with the filmmaker Laurie Townshend next. I hope you enjoy the interview as much as I have. Hi, friends. It's Heidi M, and I'm joined in the virtual room by writer, director, and multi-talented Laurie Townshend. So nice to have you here.
It's nice to be here. Nice to meet you, Heidi. Hi.
So, Laurie, we're going to be speaking about your feature documentary, A Mother Apart. But before you started to make feature films, you've had a vast career in the arts. So maybe let's tell people, your background and how
Hmm.
you started in writing and making films and all of that good stuff.
Well, yeah, that vast career in the arts was couched in education. It was sort of a peeled back onion. I was a teacher, a middle school teacher for 20 over 2 decades, and that within the context of that, I was pursuing this writing passion. That actually even started before that, before my teaching career. I was in university studying sciences, and I met a mentor, a man named Herb Gluck, who turned me on to this idea of writing for the screen. And
Mm,
we had a real sort of old school mentor mentee relationship. He would send me writing assignments and things like that through snail mail, and yeah, it was the first time that I sort of like that anyone sort of made it clear that there was a possibility to have a career in the arts. And so I left university, went into teaching, and of course managed to find my way, find ways to overlap, my teaching and my love for writing and for filmmaking. And that manifested in like film clubs that I would run for my students and
right.
film festivals at the middle school level. Then I was using my summers to make shorts, and that's sort of how I got into, being able to finally call myself a filmmaker. Because we know we struggle. A lot of emerging filmmakers struggle with that. When can I claim it? And it was around 2011 when I
Mm,
made my short feature, not my short feature, my short dramatic, a narrative short.
Mm-hmm.
called The Path Hero, and then I was doing short documentaries after that, and A Mother Apart is my first feature doc.
What a journey, right? And it's so important. I like that you mentioned your connection to education because I find that mentors along the way are always so helpful for
Hmm.
folks of us who might be part of the IBPOC community. Or I love what you have in your website about where you grew up. And you had a line, I think, that has to do with, you grew up in community housing. I did too. I grew up in public housing, but we never really felt like kids that grew up in public housing. And I think these connections that you've had along the way are probably really pivotal.
Absolutely. Yeah. Having mentors, having, you know, aspirational, elements in your life. My brothers and I talk about this all the time. Our building, it was government housing, but we were surrounded by middle class families, and we walked by homes that had swimming pools, and I went to bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs of kids, and that went to my school, and there was always a sense of, like, there's more beyond these four walls, right? And not to mention, I mean, like, the community itself, the people, um always end up making it special. Like, for me, it was really important. I had friends who, we all hated that our building, that it was at times, not being upkept, and that there were sometimes, acts of violence in and around the community. But on a whole, it was a really safe, vibrant, and I had an amazing childhood.
Right, right.
And the community made that. It was about the people.
100%. I still have conversations like this with some adult friends myself who've
Hmm.
been in and out of community housing, as I mentioned, and even just feeling safe in places like Toronto is still relatively safe when we're quote unquote, depending on who's speaking about what safety is, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know. So thank you for that. I kind of wanted to address that because I think that is very relatable to some of us, and the kind of maybe the stories that you're looking to tell as well in terms of, you're addressing. I know primarily you want to talk about the lived experience of Black women and that and the diaspora, and maybe we can kind of segue into your connection into your first short film and then leading into this feature documentary.
Yeah. You mean the short narrative, or?
Yes, the short narrative.
Yeah, that was a film called The Real Path Hero, about a an emerging hockey star, a young Black boy who loves the sport of hockey, and you pull on the experiences you have. I happen to have a brother, my oldest brother Graham, who played in the NHL, the first Jamaican-born NHLer. And I remember when I was writing the script for that short film, that I wanted there to be, I was pulling from my own life. And this particular protagonist in my film endures childhood sexual assault at the hands of someone he trusted. And he's put in a position to make an impossible choice between a pair of ice skates that are broken, damaged, gifted to him by his late father, and these brand new skates gifted to him by this monster in his life, this
Mhm.
person who has betrayed him. He has to make an impossible choice, and um, like, that whole experience isn't on the nose what my brother experienced, but I remember talking to him about, you know, the lengths he was willing to go to reach his dream, and how conflicted and how difficult that is for a young person who, is really just trying to follow their passion, and finds himself ensnared in, a really impossible, dangerous, and traumatic experience. So I wrote that. The cool thing about making that film is that I wrote it with a former student in mind. And by this point in 2011, this student was, in his 20s and was working in the industry. I taught him when he was in seventh and eighth grade drama. And so I caught up with him in 2011 and asked him if he would be in this short film. And so my first short film as a teacher, filmmaker, was with a former student, and that student happened to be Stefan James, who was like
Wow.
a big star,
As we all know,
so
it's done really well.
yeah. So it was a really cool full circle moment, and it's always nice when you have those full circle moments with your students.
For sure.
Every teacher will tell you that it's one of the most gratifying things.
And talk about mentor-mentee
Yeah.
relationship too, right? So you've so now you're moving into, as I mentioned, a feature documentary, A Mother Apart, and it's a documentary, so it comes with a lot of personal history on the part of the person you're following, the activist Staceyann Chin. What was that initial call or discussion with you, the producers, and then Stacy and herself to decide we're making this?
Yeah, that came again from personal experience. I was contemplating motherhood for myself. I was not sure if I wanted to be a mom to my own biological children. And I started to look around my community, Black Lives Matter Toronto. Our community everywhere was really activated, and I would show up to rallies and protests in Toronto with my camera, and I was documenting these mothers. I was noticing more and more that moms were showing up to the front lines with their children in tow, and I wanted to know why. I wanted to understand. Um, I think now, like when I look back now, I was looking for the kind of mom I thought I might want to be. I was looking for a template,
Mm,
wondering, is this the kind of mom I would be? So I got the idea to do a documentary about this. I was like,
right.
there are stories here, and I want to know about these women, these Black mother activists, and what it is to raise children. And so I approached Allison Duke, who at the time was heading up her production company, Goldilocks Productions, and Leah Marin, who at the time was at the NFB, and both of those people said, yes, this would be something that we would love to pursue with you. And I became, I was part of an investigate period of development with the NFB at that point. A year or so later, Oya Media Group formed with Allison and Gaddy Conte George. The NFB by this point, they were full on co-producers, and we went from there. We were following four moms initially, sort of cast our net, kind of wide, and it was going to be more of a profile of motherhood, sort of for women sharing the screen. But then, as is the case in development, lives take different shape,
For
people move
sure.
away, people drop out, and Staceyan's story she was one of the four mothers who I
Right.
reached to. Her story became the more sort of like pressing story. It had a more something that was unfolding in real time. And how I met her was just through a mutual friend.
Right.
I told this friend of mine in Toronto, Raquel Bremer, that I wanted to do this film about Black mother activists. Staceyann was already a public figure. She was on my radar. I'd read her memoir many years prior to that. And so this friend connected us, and I took my megabus down to New York on a
Yeah.
March break. 'Cause I was still teaching full time. And I met Staceyann in Zurich for the first time in 2017. And so she said yes. And the rest is, as they say, history.
For sure. I was just wondering how long it took, and now you answered my question because you can see in the film the changes in years, right? Like in terms of her daughter Zuri as well, in her age, and we're kind of growing up with the two of them as well in the film. So it was a
Absolutely.
labor of love, I'm sure, over time.
Yeah, and I like that you say that we were growing up with both of them. I've always said that this is a coming of middle age story, I have a friend, filmmaker VT90, who also says, something similar. We're always coming of age. And I really did feel that with Staceyann. Like she's lived with the absence of her mother
Right.
obviously all her life. Her mother left her before she was 3 months old. And she's made a living. Her off-Broadway play Motherstruck was about her journey with her mother and her journey, to becoming a mom to Zuri. Um, she has grown up, and this film, which is the first time she's ever said yes to someone else telling her story or
Right.
sharing in the telling of her story, this film marks yet another sort of period, another era where she's finally, she's getting to a place of, well, when you see the film, you'll understand by the end, a place
Right.
of grace, a place of acceptance, a place of compassion, for her mom, and a place of grace and compassion for herself. Because as she says at the end of the film, when you are finally in a position to fail somebody, it gives you, i.e., in a parenting role, it gives you more grace for the people who might have failed you. And I think that's such a beautiful sentiment, that really reflects the journey, the maturity, the coming of middle age that Staceyann, has gone through.
Yeah, I mean, I related to the story on different levels. I am not a mother, but I think being part of a culture where, women are looked to be nurturers, I think we can relate, whether we've been mothers or our mother figures in our families or even in our chosen families to an extent,
100%. Oh,
you
yeah.
know. So, sorry, were you gonna say
I
something?
was just going to say, like, I started off by telling you that I thought I might want to be a mom to my own biological children. And I was really, um, unwittingly looking for answers to that question about whether it was right for me. And going through this process of making the film, 6.5 years, toward the end of it, the last year and a half, 2 years, I was caregiving for my mom, who passed, in November of 2023, just as we finished the film. But I remember being so grateful that I didn't have any children. I remember being so grateful that I could be 100% committed in, with both feet, taking care of my mom, mothering my mom,
Right.
at the same time that I was mothering this film or birthing this film, into the world, bringing this film into the world. So I learned through this process that there are lots of ways to show up as a mom. I'm
100%.
so grateful for the time that I had to mother my mother, as she needed me. And yeah, there's also this notion of mothering oneself that I
Mm-hmm.
learned through this process. And
It's true.
I had Staceyann as this beautiful, I got to witness what it is, what happens when you pour into yourself the way she pours into Zuri, what happens when you give yourself compassion and patience and breadth, to make mistakes. These are all things that as women, as human beings, we need to learn how to do for ourselves as much as we need to do for our communities and our children.
Absolutely. And in the journey that we're taking in this film, there is we're actually, I mean, we're seeing like the finished film. So, and you said, 6.5 years. So, what were, if any, if you can share, any rewards or any kind of challenges in kind of this collaboration because it's so deeply personal that,
Mm,
we're feeling it at the core at some point,
yeah,
and we're witnessing so much and the layers of between her and her mother and even her and her sister, not just her and Zuri.
yeah. Well, the challenges were plentiful because we made this film, 2020 happened in the midst of
Yes.
it. So there were some real sort of like logistical and practical challenges. We had to do some remote shoots. I was directing from my basement, on FaceTime with the camera person, the camera operator. Staceyann moves around a lot, and I knew that before we
Right.
started, but things even, it became even more challenging when in 2021 she said, I'm going to Jamaica. I
Right.
can't stay in New York. New York was ground zero for COVID. It was really, really tough. She had just purchased a house and her gigs had dried up, as she says in the film. She had no money. And a friend of her was in Jamaica, was like, come stay with me. You've always
Right.
wanted to be here in Jamaica as an adult. Bring Zuri, come stay with me. And so she did. And I remember getting that call. Laurie, we're going to Jamaica for a few weeks. Okay. We're going to have to figure out if we can get a camera person in Jamaica
Yeah.
now. Um, and then that 3 weeks turned into 3 months. And
Hmm.
that 3 months turned into 3 years. She's still in Jamaica.
Yes, I realized that.
That was definitely a challenge, to
Mhm.
me and my producers. We at one point, got her a new helped her upgrade her iPhone so she could do self tapes. You'll see in the film there are
Hmm.
moments of her, doing that, and I had to sort of train her, send her a primer on how to do the framing and things like that.
For sure, for
And on the
sure.
personal front, I realized we're making a film that is really personal, that involves her child, a young person. And Staceyann and I had many, many hard conversations about what that means.
Hmm.
Um, Zuri is her child, and of course, Staceyann's doing the best by her and making the best decisions that she knows how to make. But she's well aware that Zuri could one day wake up and be really angry that she was part of this.
Right.
And I remember having that conversation, and the filmmaker in me was worried that, like, oh wow, we've invested so much already. She could decide this is no longer working for her,
Yes.
and that's how
Hmm.
consent works. It's reversible. It can be taken back. And so I remember not struggling with that. It was just a reality that I
Yes.
had to really face, and that's one of the realities of making documentaries that are this personal. But the fact that I showed up to that hard conversation, and that Stacey Ann and I both had the respect and the open communication to really grapple with some of those trickier conversations, I think it's a testament to her,
Right.
and a testament to the process that we set out to do. It was always meant to be very transparent, and that was a challenge, but it was also an opportunity to really grow as a filmmaker and as friends. Stacey, and I
Absolutely.
call her a sister now.
Hmm.
She's somebody who I really respect and love.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes sense. And I think I think it comes across in the film too because there is a sense of generosity on both their parts.
Hmm.
Stacey and Zuri's in being so open. I mean, I follow Stacey Ann on social media, so I have seen them kind of grow up a little bit over the
Yeah.
years. So it is kind of nice to see that she is that comfortable to an extent as a child to be able to participate. And I think being fully aware of her participation. And yes, maybe as she gets older, things will change. But I think it's also in the film that, maybe Zuri will make her own film at some point, right?
That's right. Yeah, and she is primed to be, it doesn't matter what she does. It's about who she is and how she shows up in the world. That's
Hmm.
part of what has, captivated people who have watched their living room protest videos on YouTube
Yes,
since
yes.
really, like Zuri's voice is, um, it's remarkable how what it's remarkable what happens when you make room for somebody's voice, for somebody
Absolutely.
through voice to emerge. And the fact that Zuri is at a place where she feels confident, and you can see that and you can hear that in the way she talks and the way she moves the world. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait to see what she does. And if she does decide to make a film one day, I really do hope she calls me.
Exactly. It would be, I love the extension of this one. Um,
Absolutely.
you talked about how Stacey Ann does move a lot, and in the film we do, and even in the midst of COVID and all of that, you had to travel, the crew had to travel. What was that like in terms of sustaining sort of this narrative and this deep connection while also navigating these, geographical logistics?
It was tough. We were doing it with a skeleton crew because we
Hmm.
couldn't really travel with, a full
Right.
contingent of crew members with COVID protocols being in place. So that was difficult. And yet I felt like, because of, the travel to Germany and Jamaica, Germany to find her mom, who, you know, went off grid during COVID, um, we were all really, there was a lot of anxiety. That was my first international shoot. It was just me, Ashley Iris Gill, and Sarah Veda, sound person and camera operator, DP. It was just the three of us and Stacey Ann. And she was really anxious,
Sure.
to try to find her mom. And I was really anxious about just like driving in Germany, being in a place where we just didn't know what was going to happen.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of yeah, there was a lot of anxiety on that trip. Jamaica, you'll see a lot of Jamaica in the film.
Yes.
Those moments were really did feel like a homecoming, and there were a lot. You can sort of feel it in the energy of how
Mhm.
it was shot as well. Like, you see this image of Zuri and her hands in the dirt and the red dirt of, the hills of St. Catharines, Jamaica, and there was a real sense of coming back home and planting seeds. And I remember those moments feeling really celebratory and kind of like, just reflective of a journey that we had been on. And there was a
Mhm.
way of sort of, she says it in the film as well, there's a way that she was sort of standing still in Jamaica that she hadn't before. There was
Right.
time and there was just an energy, a different energy in those shoots that we did in Jamaica. We did our master interview that you see in the film in her home in Jamaica.
Mm.
So yeah, the movement was interesting. It was really, not to mention that first trip we did in Montreal, where she went to
Right.
go see the house where her mother lived for many years, the home that she thought she was going to live in.
Yes.
Stacey, and we don't have this in the film, but she took French lessons in Jamaica because she was that
Um,
convinced that she was going to be coming to Canada to live with her mom in Montreal.
oh God.
And yeah, when she decides to go there, again, that the camera's kind of shaky. She's
Mhm.
walking the street, she's knocking on doors. Did you know the woman who lived next door? That also is reflective of, this
Mhm.
sort of precarious, uncertain, anxious filled kind of moment in her life. So
Mhm.
um, we were right along with her,
Absolutely.
on that journey. Even though I don't know exactly what it is to be in her shoes, we did our best to have an empathetic camera and an empathetic gaze. And, we were really, you know, attempting to mirror what was happening for her emotionally in the way that we shot the film.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that because I think that's also what I find in this film that my relationship with my mother is completely different. I was also raised by my grandmother, but completely different dynamics. But I think you can relate to the feeling of having maybe some fractures in your relationship with a parent figure, or even your mother, daughter mother relationships can still be a little bit shaky sometimes. But I wanted to ask you about the visual style because I also noticed the use of some animation and the photos that she has and some archival stuff and instead of blending it all in. And I don't know if that's something that you discuss from the beginning and also how it translated to your editing room.
Great question. We didn't necessarily talk about the animation from the beginning, but we knew right from the outset that Staceyann had this amazing archive. She had the presence of mind when she first found her mother when she was 25, and she hadn't seen her mom since she was 9 years old. She went to Germany. She had a camera. She had the presence of mind to document things.
Right.
She was always documenting. And so we had this really amazing archive of home videos and moments with her sister and, even Zuri's biological father, the sperm donor,
Hmm.
Baba. They don't call him sperm donor, obviously,
Yes.
still in her life. So yeah, there was this really beautiful archive, and we definitely knew that that was going to be part of the film.
Hmm.
In fact, early on, it was during COVID, it was one of the major tasks. We had a courier go and pick up her DV tapes and carefully um, deliver them to a company that digitized them
Nice.
and then return them to Stacy. And so yeah, that was an important part of our journey. And I knew that like part of my process was logging, watching all this archive,
Right.
putting them in categories according to themes and what they're, things that dealt with her grandmother, because she documented her grandmother who raised her for the first
Sure.
9 years of her life. Putting them in categories, really logging all this footage so that when it came time to do the edit, and I worked with a remarkable editor, Sonia Goding Tokobo, and a story editor, Ricardo Acosta. When we sat together in the editing suite, I had ingested a lot of this archive and knew, if Sonia or Ricardo was like, we need something that does this, or
Yeah.
that was part of what made that process workable. The animation, I don't remember when that came to be. I
Hmm.
think we were probably talking about things that lived in Staceyann's imagination as a child. Like it was that longing to live
Yes.
in
Hmm.
Montreal house, that first voiceover. Um, you can hear it in her, the way she says it. I longed for life in that house. I used to imagine my mother on the front lawn. We had one or two photos that
Hmm.
could have worked there, but it was the fact that it was this childhood longing and this childhood imagination that first got me thinking about a different way to depict it.
Sure.
And so, we didn't necessarily have, and I think it was a conversation with Oya, with Allison and Gaddy, where we were like, animation could work, but we didn't have big money for like,
Right.
full on animation. It was more sort of graphic. It's a little
Yes.
more like a graphic artist. Ramon Charles was hired to do the work, and it's beautiful.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. It was actually, now that I remember it, it was also a conversation with my editor because we were thinking about a scrapbook. Stacey
Hmm.
being a writer and having, a space where she puts her ideas down. We thought it might be interesting to have sort of a scrapbooky feel. So that lent itself to a graphic artist who could sort of make that come alive in a creative way, a colorful way. And so, yeah, I think the animations, as rudimentary as they might be, it's not Pixar, but they kind of work,
I think it
Um,
goes
so,
beautifully, actually. I think sometimes it's a little bit more heartbreaking because you're seeing elements of photos that Stacey Ann has, and
yeah,
the little girl in me also kind of her heart was broken now that you told me that she had learned French, things that we do as children, right? Because we want to please our parents or
yeah,
we want to be the best
yeah.
that we
Or
could
in
be.
her case, she just wanted to be,
One
she just
love.
wanted to be with her. She just
And
wanted
with her,
presence.
100%, for sure.
Yeah.
So the film has had a great journey. It premiered at Hot Dogs Film Fest last year, and it continues its journey. It's now on CBC Gem here in Canada,
That's right. And
and
NFB.ca.
the NFB.ca.
Mhm.
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that. So what are your hopes now in terms of it's a little bit more free, it's freer in the world, and the conversations that we can have, like ourselves and with our loved ones, and with when we're like I said, we're growing up with these beautiful people.
Yeah, I am so glad you asked that question, is I actually had an experience. I had an opportunity to experience new um, context for, watching the film. It was a home viewing on Sunday. I attended this past Sunday, and it was with 12 of my dearly departed mom's closest friends from her church, who hadn't, like you, weren't able to make it to the premiere and missed a couple of the other Toronto screenings. So we had this intimate screening in one of my mom's friends' homes with about 12 people, and it was an intergenerational gathering. There were people in their 20s and people in their 80s, and all Caribbean, backgrounds.
Mhm.
And we watched it, we ate, we communed, we cried, and we had conversation after. And
Mhm.
it was so gratifying. The Q&As after a big festival, amazing.
Sure.
I love that. And we're about to experience that this week in the UK.
Mhm.
Stacey and I will be there, and it's
Nice.
usually it's amazing when we can be in a room with like 200-300 people.
Sure.
Um, but there's also something extremely powerful and beautiful about being in a small room with 12 or 10 or just you and your mother,
Mhm.
watching this film and talking. So, yeah, and the conversations that, I hope to be able to facilitate. These would be considered impact screenings,
Right. Mhm.
That's what I want to do. That's what I want this next year and beyond to be for this film. It's going to be an opportunity for me to again, full circle, bring back some of my teaching, some of my
Mhm.
facilitation skills. Because this is the sort of thing I would have done with my students. You know, I'd share a powerful piece of media, and then help draw out themes and help people make connections to their own lives.
Absolutely.
Uh, this is what I love to do, and so I hope I can continue to do it. And this past Sunday was my first opportunity to see what it could be.
How amazing is that? What a great
Um,
story. Thank you for sharing.
well, thank you
Um,
for asking
I
that question.
For sure. Thank you, Laurie. I could speak with you for yet another hour, but appreciate your time. We already mentioned the film is free in the world now on CBC Gem and NFB.ca. Laurie will look forward to your journey with the film and what comes next. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Heidi. This has been amazing. I've really, really enjoyed our conversation. Thank
Me
you.
too. Thank you.